The discussion we've had here today has mostly got the history and nature of Canada and the rights Canadians hold upside down and backwards. Canada is not a nice place that had a charter of rights and then guaranteed us all the freedoms that we enjoy. That is not how freedoms work. When Canada was founded, the only people who were allowed to vote were males over the age of 21 who owned property. And by the way, if you own property, you were almost certainly white. So only rich white men were allowed to vote when Canada was founded. The way we got from there to here wasn't by nice, polite discussion. It was by people taking risks, breaking the law, and standing up. Where would Canada be if Viola Davis hadn't illegally sat in the white section of a theatre in 1949? Where would women's rights be if Nellie McClung hadn't taken a piece of political theatre around Manitoba, earning women the right to vote in this country? What rights would people have to things like a weekend and overtime pay if it hadn't been for the Winnipeg General Strike and countless other illegal protests by labor organizers? It's worth noting that not one but two former presidents of Unifor have been arrested doing illegal occupations of work sites. Where would the rights of Indigenous and Métis people be if it hadn't been for Louis Riel, if it hadn't been for the tragedy of Ipperwash, if it hadn't been for Kanesatake? Every single right anyone in this chamber enjoys was won not by the Charter, it was won by protest. Protest is not the enemy of any right that you have. Protest is the means by which that right was won and will be protected in the future. So I don't frankly much care whether this bylaw is charter compliant. I don't much care whether or not the specific niceties of the distance will live through a charter challenge. What I care about is that the foundational principles that give us our rights are won by protest, assembly, and free speech. Every single one of them. No government, no monarch, nobody has ever voluntarily stood up and said, you know what? We should just give people more rights. They're always won by protest. There's been a suggestion that we are somehow taking away the rights of one group to protect the rights of another if we allow protests to happen. And there's been conversation about faith-based institutions. Here's what your bylaw will do. There have been protests in front of churches multiple times by survivors of the residential school system. They have gone and sat on the steps of churches and encouraged people not to go in. If you pass that bylaw, you are saying they are wrong. Now, here's the thing that is so hard about allowing for protests, supporting protests. If you support protest, you have to support it for people you disagree with too. I once, as a member of the library board, got into very big trouble for standing up for the right for someone to talk about something and say some things at a library that I utterly despised. I despised everything that person wanted to say. But I knew
5 seconds.
that if you didn't protect them, the consequences would be what we're seeing in the United States, where librarians are being fired for putting books on shelves and allowing LGBTQ performers to perform in libraries.
Thank you, Councillor Perks. Your time is up. Please